Hey everybody, sorry we're about a minute late. I was actually enjoying a nice chat with our co-host this evening. So yes, enjoyable. Hi everybody, thank you for coming along again this evening. Obviously it was a bit of an unusual thing for me to stream yesterday. For those of you who may have missed it, we put out a report yesterday looking at the drone incident in Los Angeles, where a drone and a firefighting aircraft known as a Super Scooper allegedly came together, with parts of the drone becoming lodged inside the wing of the aircraft. To provide context and help with their investigation, picture of an evidence bag was released to show the type of drone that was involved. That was obviously featured in our report. Since then, the reaction's been pretty split. A lot of people, accepting and obviously, condemning the pilot and that type of thing, etc. I don't think anyone's particularly happy with the pilot, but which is the same with most stories these days, frankly, with social media becoming a bit of a heated arena for all types of conspiracy theory to grow as well. Now, there is nothing wrong with a good conspiracy theory, and history tells us that many a government and leader will present things to their public for all sorts of reasons that aren't actually true. Does that really happen? So a good conspiracy theory isn't something alien to me, and I think it is something we embrace from the point of view that some have turned out to be much closer to the truth than originally thought. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the questions of our viewers that they raised in terms of the possibility that this was faked or set up. Not everyone asking questions is jumping to that conclusion, and actually some just want extra information, and that's always healthy. A few things I would ask us to keep in mind here is that the picture we will, of course, look at is the one of the bag of evidence. We do not know how many other bags there are and what those other bags may contain. This is an active investigation, so the information coming out will be restricted, and generally only information that could actually assist with the investigation will be put out there. We have all seen the details of crimes where video of suspects or pictures of vehicles, etc., are released to assist. Not all releases in this vein are as obvious as that, but there could well be a reason that they've released this specific picture. Perhaps a relative or friend will put two and two together when their friend in LA no longer has their drone, which is the same as this one, frankly. So try not to judge the situation as if it is complete. It is far from that. Joining me today is Matt Williams, a former RAF helicopter pilot. He's also a civilian pilot and a highly experienced drone pilot who ran the biggest drone training school in the UK. Please put your questions as they're raised in the chat with a tag at Geeksvana. It helps me to see them as we're going through. We promote open opinion on this channel, and I do not have any more access beyond those of the press to this story, etc. as well. So my thoughts are based on my own and based on what I judge from what I read. Moderators who are in the chat, please do allow anyone who wants to disagree, which is absolutely fine. But obviously personal attacks, just let everybody that's watching, personal attacks from either side or foul language fall foul of both YouTube and Geeksvana moderation policies. We're here to try and have an open conversation about all sorts of wonderful aviation topics, basically. So yes, it's an important one to remember, please, everybody. So we'll bring Matt in. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? You're back.
I am. I'm back.
He's back
and rocking and rolling.
On Geeksvana once again, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Now, I really want to appreciate. I really appreciate you joining us, because obviously you've got some varying levels of experience, all very much relevant to today's story from the point of view of flying aircraft at low levels. Your former RAF helicopter pilots, and you've flown those all around the world in all sorts of different theatres and scenarios, etc., and all sorts of various types of danger. But of course, you also have your own experiences, which we'll come on to as well. So again, thank you for joining us, because obviously, as I say, your relevance is particularly applicable to this story, and it enhances my own knowledge as well.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, right? I think similarly to the live stream I joined you guys on, yourself and Graham, on a couple of weeks ago. Was that just before Christmas? That's flown, hasn't it, that time? But yeah, it's really important, because there's a lot of people saying in certain camps and different sides. And as you mentioned in the intro, we don't have all the facts, right? And I, having done some air accident investigation work and sat on boards on that side of things in the military when there were accidents involving people that I knew and aircraft that I had flown, I always despised it when people kind of started taking guesses and saying, "Oh, well, it was the crew that made an error," or so. You never know until the investigation is done, and even then, you don't know everything, right?
But, no, exactly, and it's
getting some of that information out there is important.
Exactly, and it is the very nature of social media as well. Now, when we bring up the questions, I haven't included the people's names or the usernames that actually ask the questions, because I don't want people attacked for questions that other people don't think are worthy, etc. This is social media. People ask questions all the time, and we are more than happy to obviously chat about those. Now, in terms of a moment of calm, this is terrible. This situation is a terrible situation, and the damage, I feel, is clear. However, the plane did land safely, and actually the crew didn't know this was happening. So we also need to keep this in a bit of perspective too. But of course, this could become, even more serious should this kind of thing continue to happen, because it was just bizarre how many posts there were across social media of people flying in what was obviously a TFR. And also, let us be clear that the conditions in terms of wind and safety to fly near the fires alone, let alone the TFR and low flying aircraft in the area, is still a stupid thing to do. So it's not just, was this guy flying in a TFR? You don't need a TFR to fly aircraft low for manned aircraft to interact with unmanned aircraft. Hence, the RAF in the UK have a free telephone number for you to be able to let them know if you are going to be flying a drone somewhere you think it might come into close proximity, shall we say, to RAF helicopters and all types of their aircraft. So we need to keep our eyes open when we're out flying our drones, and it's one of the reasons why line of sight is actually really important. And of course, one of the first rules there, that unmanned gives way to manned, basically. So this isn't just a simple case of this person was flying in a TFR. Basically, it's an important one. So I just wanted to have that moment of calm. Now, straight into it. I wanted to talk about something that I had spotted and get Matt's opinion on this, actually. Now, the photograph of the plane, which obviously everyone's seen about 1 million times now. I do feel sorry for any plane spotters who are tracking these aircraft and what they're doing in LA at the moment, because all that will come up when you look up the Super Soakers or the 415, etc., is these damaged photos at the moment, basically. But one question I have is, and it was raised in the comments as well, is in terms of this picture, that's quite a square looking hole. And again, this is just from my own inexperience, but it looks to me like it could possibly have been taken after the drone was taken out, if that makes sense. Does that make any kind of sense with you?
I think so, potentially. Although, to be honest, I think with the energies involved, it makes very little difference. And we don't know. I mean, this aircraft, the wing structure of this aircraft in particular isn't my area of expertise. Yes. Although it's very similar to every other aircraft of the kind of monocoque construction. There'll be wing ribs behind that wing, and from that picture that you've just shown, to me, it looks as though the wing ribs are between those black stripes, right. Yes. In the middle of that. It looks as though there's a wing rib. And it looks to me from that picture as though the drone has hit on the left-hand side, as we look at it, of a wing rib. And it is then, the energy has continued back and probably out in whichever direction it was traveling slightly.
Okay, so it's pushed the split along, basically, as the energy has obviously gone into it.
Yeah, because the rib has reinforced what is very thin aluminium. Right. On the actual wing itself. Yeah, there's the picture for people who don't understand. So the wing, primarily, you'll have a spar or a dual spar in this case, by the looks of it, down the center of the wing, which is where the majority of the load of the wing is taken. So that will then be anchored to the fuselage, and effectively, in this case, the wing lifts the whole fuselage up through the spars. And then off the spars, to make the actual shape of the wing, the aerodynamic shape of the wing, so it can generate lift, you put wing ribs, and those are the kind of aerofoil shape elements. Again, very thin components, effectively, because you need to keep that weight down. Yeah, and it's all very flimsy and floppy, right? Until you then skin it with what is very thin aluminium, and not much thicker than a Coke can. It's no exaggeration to say, like, probably if you think of a Coke can and how easy that is to kind of crunch and twist around, it's probably twice the thickness of a Coke can would be the skin on the wings themselves.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not much, because again, you think how much that weighs on the surface area.
Yes.
So for me, it's hit that rib, and then gone to the next weakest point, right, which is just to the side of it.
Sense.
It's bent some of it's split the aluminium, and it's probably entered the wing and sat inside the cavity between what is the front skin and then the first spar, if you like, in there, or a winged fuel tank. I don't know where the fuel tanks are on this.
Yeah, they are. I think. Did we? No. Okay. I thought I did think we had a picture of that actually, but the fuel tanks actually sit further to the back of the wing than I would normally expect actually. But I mean, I haven't exactly looked at the designs of hundreds of aircraft here, but I was surprised actually how much further back than they sat than the mental picture I had of them actually. But it's interesting you said about the ribs actually, because the company that are supplying the parts that sent them out expedited over the weekend so they can get the thing back in the air today, they did show the ribs, so perhaps that is where that first bubble is, where it's hit the rib, as you're saying. And but again, the ribs, I described it yesterday in the show as they look like pieces of card in the packaging. It literally looked like like someone was going to build a model aircraft out of it. It didn't look to me, I'm expecting not steel girders and things obviously, but I don't know what I expect these things to be made up of. But it is perhaps a misconception that you can gain from the point of view that you think aircraft are going to be extremely solid, when of course, especially something like this, which is a water bomber, they are designed to be as light as possible so that they can obviously carry more water. Basically, they're not designed, although of course things are going to happen with bird strikes and all that kind of thing, and I presume as well, looking at the design through these kind of manuals, etc., and speaking to a couple of engineers today, that of course this part of the plane is of that type to help the aerodynamic side of things and also to keep the weight. And of course there isn't necessarily something vital that it's going to hit if something goes in that part. Other more vital parts of the airplane are stronger, do have stronger structures, etc. Like on these planes in particular, you can imagine it's got almost like a boat hull at the bottom. From the point of view, of course, it's going to be all its life, it's going to be in and out of the water and all of those forces and anything else it may come across in the water, etc. as well. So it reminded me as well actually of the old Spitfire diagrams from World War II that showed all the places where Spitfires had been hit that made it back, and some of the damage was just incredible, and they were still flying, etc. So it was described as well by an engineer today by me that it's literally the worst place in terms of PR for drones. It's the worst place for this thing to have hit. A few inches this way, that way, up, down, left, right, it probably would have scratched and caused the dent and bounced off, or obviously disintegrated and just carried on. It's almost like a freakish thing where it's actually hit almost precisely where it needs to hit to breach that part of the wing. Basically, it's. But again, obviously that's how accidents are, aren't they? It happens that way.
That's it. And I think what you've just mentioned is part of the engineering challenge of aviation, right? Like we're moving into an era now where a lot more composite materials are being used. Those materials are a lot stronger in the design, in the way the design specification requires them to be. But even so, actually very potentially brittle in other directions. So, you can see that when you're watching Formula One, for example. The cars are super strong in the directions that they are designed to operate in. Those wings, the rear wing on a Formula One car when it's doing 205 miles an hour down the start-finish straight, and the wing flexes slightly and blah, but it goes into a wall sideways at 70 miles an hour and it shatters into 1,000 pieces. So that's the design challenge. And even when we were flying battlefield helicopters, when we, my colleagues at the time who were flying fast jets and multi-engine aircraft, like we would all want to fly in a titanium bath, surrounded like bulletproof, but it just isn't an option because those materials are just too heavy to get in the air or then be able to do what you need to for us to get 16 people down the back, or for a fast jet to carry the ordnance or whatever it might be. You have that trade-off all the time. And the reality is that we don't build aircraft, particularly aircraft like this, expecting that you're going to hit a bird or expecting that you're going to hit an aircraft a drone. It's just not something that you can. The energies involved aren't something that you could protect against realistically and still get an aircraft in the air.
No, exactly. And it will come up in the questions, because people do mention bird strikes in the questions, etc. But we have to remember that even a small battery like this is a solid object. And if we look at the photo of the drone itself, you can see where the battery is deformed and popped up towards this section here, the section where the switch is, which is obviously one of the impact points. So perhaps the aircraft has hit it from behind. I'm not sure. I mean, who knows? Will we ever know that much? Who knows? But yeah, it shows the impact point, etc. But obviously, a bird, they're hardy creatures, as you're about to find out with Matt's story as well. But to have a lump of a battery in the middle, this is still the design flaw, as it were, for a drone of any kind of size. Because obviously, once you start to get to the size of drones that you used to fly, the professional drones, etc., they would even have multiple large batteries on them and that type of thing. It's this solid lump is the problem, isn't it?
Kind of. It actually, from a very simplistic point of view, yes. Actually, when you look at the physics involved, it gets very, very complicated. But the fundamentals are that the kinetic energy equation is half mv squared, right? Yep. So half of whatever the mass and the speed, the velocity you're traveling at squared is the impact energy. It makes very little difference in the grand scheme of things. It does make a difference for those who are physicists and are going to chastise me for that. It does make a slight difference if there is soft body physics involved, or if it's just if it's something that is totally solid. But actually, the amount of difference that makes isn't orders of magnitude out of what the equation gives you anyway, as this much mass hitting at this speed with this amount of area generates this much energy, and that is what it is. So yeah, in this case, yes, the battery is probably the thing that stays most intact. But that's more because it's the most dense element of the drone that's hit the wind, rather than the whole thing weighing 249 grams, hitting at 150 knots equals X amount of joules of energy. That's really what the aeroplane felt.
Yeah, no, indeed.
It doesn't care that it was a battery or propellers, or it's all just
in
weighs what it
my
weighs.
mind, when I look at the debris and when I look at the makeup of the debris, I kind of see the battery. Once impact has happened and once it's actually in contact, etc., it's the battery pushing the parts through into it, and as you say, that it's that whole mass, because we do have parts on there with, for instance, the top end, which looks fairly intact, but of course, that's going to happen. One of the things actually one of the engineers today said to me is take your Mini 3 outside and fire it at your car at the same speed that this would have happened. Use the same forces that would have been in play here, and fire that at your car. And I guarantee you'll be very upset what happens to your car afterwards. And of course, cars are designed for pedestrian incidents and have side impact protection, but the skin itself may look very different. Just very quickly, thank you, Steel City Drone Pilot Paul, for the £50 donation. That's really appreciated, sir. Thank you. It's extremely generous. I often forget to mention the super chats because it's not something that we push, but I really do appreciate it, Paul. Thank you. One of the things that's interested me on this is the size of conspiracy that would take to fake something like this, and also actually, do they even necessarily need it? There are so many departments and agencies to cover this up. So many people, and I know some people even think the moon landing, so that there isn't convincing everybody. I'm not saying you're right or wrong by that, basically. Please don't hate me, flat earthers or moon landing deniers. But also, do they really need it? Drones have a relatively small voice in the world, even though it feels big to us inside it. And remote ID and other laws that have been passed show that our voices are actually rarely listened to. And I think that, if authorities look on social media platforms, just pick any social media platform, and you'll find irresponsible drone use on there being posted and often boasted about, basically. So it also feels like a stretch to me for this to be faked or to be a setup, because I don't think they need to do it.
They don't need to do it, right? And
it sounds harsh, and I don't want to be unpopular with the hobby, etc. But yeah,
they don't need to fake it. The other thing is, I mean, I don't see, looking at that image that we've got that everyone's seen, I don't see how you would make an impact that looks like that if the aircraft wasn't operating at its normal operating speeds within its normal flight envelope, because you couldn't just stand there and hit something that hard. And I mean, it takes some doing, right?
Yeah.
You'd need a lot.
Yeah.
You'd need a lot of mass behind it, and then you could go slower. But either way, it would be very difficult to do that without it actually happening as it's been said that it's going to happen. And I don't think there's any reason for, certainly, like if my aircraft came back down with that damage, you wouldn't take off knowing that it was there before you went flying, right? And if it comes back with it, it's come back with that damage. Like,
yeah.
Don't,
no, indeed. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, obviously the modern world, the modern social media, etc. It's kind of enhanced these types of thoughts and conspiracies, etc. So I can understand how it brews, and indeed a lot of people, even in the comments of my video yesterday, when I've explained certain things to them, like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I see that. So there's nothing wrong with raising questions either. But it's an interesting one that I kind of it wasn't the answers I was expecting, which is why we actually used quite a low res version of the image yesterday in our video, because I just picked the first one that we had and thought, okay, I'll stick that in there. And in actual fact, the pictures we first loaded failed, so I had to put one in live and just grab the first one, as people who watch the show will know. But it's an interesting thing. But it's also, this is a relatively rare occurrence in terms of, this doesn't mean the safety book on drones, the rule book on drones need to be thrown out and rewritten and lots more restrictions need to happen or anything else like that. This is something that, with more and more drones in the sky, this is something that's going to happen, and we're going to see this in the future more often in terms of these kind of collisions happening. But obviously the issue here is that there's a TFR in place and there's low flying aircraft, there's an emergency situation, there's so many reasons why you shouldn't be flying a drone, the wind, the fires themselves. So it isn't a requirement for more regs, although I think this will probably be used in congressional and even perhaps even UK Parliament discussions, frankly, in terms of the potential danger. But this isn't something that's happening all day, every day. This is, to me, still feels like a bit of a freak occurrence, because frankly, if Matt was to jump in an aeroplane, which he's able to fly, and I was down here with my Mini 3 drone, and you paid me £1 million to hit his aircraft, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. Basically, bringing those two things together actually takes a lot of skill, which is why often the counter drone stuff where they fire nets onto the drones, or they take it out with another drone, they don't tend to take off, excuse the pun, because of course it's very difficult to catch another aircraft in travel. So it is, there's a lot of freakish circumstances around this as well, which is but certainly I've heard people saying that we need to have licenses for everybody, that type of thing. I don't think that's the answer personally. You can have a license, look at car drivers, you can have a license and still drive like an absolute idiot, basically. So it doesn't actually mean you're competent. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't actually mean you're competent. So there are good and bad in every walk of life and every hobby, frankly. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is actually Matt's own experience of this. And thank you, Matt, for talking about this, because obviously it's not I can't imagine it's the most favorite of your memories when you look back at your military career. But of course, you did have a fairly full-on strike experience yourself. We've got a couple of images of it, which actually altered your career, didn't it?
It did, yeah. So like lots of people, I think, who've flown, particularly in the low-level environment, most of us have had at some point, or will have, a bird strike. Just on the whole, those birds tend to be smaller and they bounce off, or they hit somewhere that doesn't cause any damage. But in this instance, I was flying a Puma 1 on combat operations out in Iraq. And we were flying at low level at night, on night vision goggles, and actually no one expects birds to really be flying at night. I know that they do, but in the middle of the desert, you wouldn't expect to hit a seagull, right? So we were doing about 145 knots, which is what we transited at, 50 feet at night in the Puma, and massive.
Sorry, did you say 145 knots at 50 feet?
Yeah.
Crikey. Okay.
Yeah.
just taking that in for a moment there, we know.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, to be fair, the risks of the chances of being engaged and shot down are higher than what you'd expect birds to be flying around at 50 feet at night, right?
Indeed,
so, yeah, but Yeah, flying around, flying in formation, transiting down to a target, and massive explosion inside our cockpit, and everyone, all the crew, myself, well, covered in blood, and a huge hole where I was sat. So I sat in the right-hand seat in this case of the aircraft flying the aeroplane. A co-pilot in the left-hand seat who was on the operations. We were doing a very highly qualified pilot as well. Just in case something like this happens.
Yeah.
You know, and a crewman on the gun down at the back of the aircraft, just behind where I would have been sat there. And yeah, flying along, massive explosion, everyone covered in blood. No one can raise me on the comms. There's a hole where I was once sat. The other thing is, in the Puma, when we got body armor, the seat armor, it's what we call winged seat armor. So you actually can't see the person that you're sat next to because you're strapped into the seat, and the wing armor comes up around your head, because that's the bit that we use to bulletproof us, right? Isn't the aircraft, it's protecting ourselves. So we wear body armor and we sit in an armored seat. And yeah, this bird, as it turns out, hit the aircraft. It hit me in the chest so hard. I came through the aircraft, broke the window, damaged the airframe itself, hit me in the chest so hard that it broke my body armor. It deformed the cockpit structure such that it blew the door clean off the aircraft.
Wow.
And the door just missed the tail rotor, which that on Pumas has killed flight crews before, when that right-hand door is detached from the aircraft. And missed. So actually, our doors, interestingly, the front doors on this cockpit are wired shut, because it was, you could eject them, jettison them if you needed to, but yeah, doors had to come off in the past and killed everybody because they hit the tail rotor. So that went down, and yeah, I was unconscious. Knocked unconscious, broke 3 ribs, broke my body armor. You know, a pretty heavy hit, really. And this is one of those messages that I have spent, as you're aware, the last 10 years since before the drone phenomenon became a thing. I said, look, we need to get this message out to people, because it isn't, unfortunately, it's not if, it's when an aircraft interacts with a drone. We've seen that now, and it has happened a couple of times in the past. And luckily we've got away with it, I would say, so far. Nothing catastrophic has happened, although, you know, this incident is terrible, and the one we're discussing in particular, for me, more so because it grounds that aircraft at a time where it's needed to help save people's lives and their livelihoods. But yeah, you know, the potential consequences are terrible. This is why, if nothing else, if people see this and they've got their drones and they're like, yeah, it probably didn't happen. Well, I can say, hand on heart, this isn't lies or made up. It looks like it definitely did happen. And either way, do you know what? Even if this has been made up by the FBI or whoever it is to bring in more rules and regulations, whatever, the biggest takeaway needs to be that you need to fly your drone responsibly, please, because there are real people who have real families. They have husbands, wives, children, mums, dads, brothers, sisters, whatever it may be. And they're the people who are not going to go home if your drone hits their aircraft in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And yes, you probably will end up in prison, quite rightly.
Exactly.
But this is a real potential problem. This isn't made up. Energy is energy, and if you wouldn't want to stand there and let me throw a brick at you at 150 miles an hour.
That's it. But it's why
when you're flying a drone.
Yeah, it's why we have these temporary restrictions. They are there to help you. They're not, people see the temporary restrictions and think, oh, it's stopping me from flying my drone. No. It's keeping your drone safe, you safe. And as you say, and we stressed this in the show yesterday, manned aviation means there are people on board. These super scoopers, and before we get too far away from it, Matthew, I say it every single time, but thank you for your service. Whenever you describe that story, it gives me chills. It gave me even more chills because I didn't realize about. I presume the door was off because somebody ripped it off to get to you, but it's extraordinary, and I'm very, very happy that you're sat in front of us right now, frankly. But these super scooper crews as well, these 415s, I think they are, These are brave men and women that are, this is incredibly difficult aviation. This isn't some computer game where, go scoop up the water and then go put the fire out. And, those of us flying Microsoft Simulator can do the little fire missions and everything else like that. This isn't a game. This is people's lives. And these people are choosing to come all the way from Canada and assist in some very dangerous operations at really, in fairly old aircraft, but at the cutting edge of aviation, in my opinion, because they're flying in areas that they don't know, with all sorts of risks, all sorts of undulations. Los Angeles is not a flat place. And it's incredible work they're doing. And that's why the restrictions are in place. We don't want to sound like you must follow, the rules and over that type of thing. But when it comes to this kind of thing, we're not talking about somebody flying their drone a little bit out of line of sight, or debating the spotter rule, or any of the other bits and pieces that me and Matt have both spent time, unfortunately, debating. This is the very serious core part of regulation, and the bits that and hence why there are such significant punishments, jail time, huge fines, etc., felonies in the States and here in the UK for breaching these things. And it's very much a no excuse type of thing in terms of prosecution, because it's so very serious. And we really cannot stress that. And thank you for making that point, Matt, because as we move on to these comments, we don't want this to come across flippant. We don't want this to come across as we're minimizing what is this central core message with this entire story, frankly.
Yeah. And obviously, and whether the audience knows or not, and you mentioned it at the intro, like, I built the biggest drone training school in the world. Obviously, I benefited, I guess, personally from the message that we put out there, and from the fact that there are regulations, and I understand that. I've moved away from that now. But all the way through, every single time I've been on with you, and I've done my own stuff, hundreds, if not thousands of videos and podcasts over the years, the message is that core one, which is do the right thing. Like, yes, it's a drone. Yes, it's small. Yes, it doesn't weigh much. Yes, the chances of it happening are very small, but if it does happen, the outcome of it potentially could be catastrophic. I would say in this case, yes, the aircraft landed safely. They're going to get it fixed quickly. But actually, when you look at it from a quantitative perspective, actually, I wouldn't be surprised if the outcome of this is catastrophic, because the loss of life, the loss of property, the value placed on the things that have been lost because there isn't an extra water bomber in the air. Bear in mind, they've drafted these extra ones in from, as you said, from Canada. These aren't even American assets. They've come from Canada to help, because there aren't many of them in the world. And
there is a significant loss to that operation, in terms of, because of course everything was grounded for a short while at the time as well. So this isn't just this aircraft that was grounded initially. So it's an important one. So hence Matt speaks so passionately about this, frankly. Okay, let's bring up some of the questions and run through these. So the first one here: the FAA and the FBI are working with Congress to convince them to ban DJI drones. If there's no red scuff marks on the drone that has little damage, it's all conspiracy. No arrest equals a lie. Okay, some of the parts of that I just can't answer. No arrest equals a lie. Well, you do not want to see the solve rates of murders and serious crimes, let alone minor, less serious crimes in any Western nation, United States or the UK. No arrest doesn't necessarily mean a lie, unfortunately. But in terms of the whole DJI ban thing, I don't think this has anything to do with that. That is a political move in terms of security. Showing DJI drones crashing into things would be as useful as showing someone driving a Toyota car into an airplane, however that would happen. Perhaps they're, doing a stunt in a movie or something, but it's useless from that point of view. Now, in terms of, because this has come up in other questions, in terms of there being no red scuffs on the drone, and a few people have talked about little damage as well. I don't know what picture they're looking at, but that's quite a heavily damaged drone in my eyes. There's only whether or not they think that bit on the right, there's lots of body under there. But just to be clear, that image on that part on the right, the DJI cover, that is only the cover. There is no drone underneath that. There's not the drone and then the battery next to it. That's all that's left. It's a strange one.
Also, and I think again, from a understanding the physics and the physics behind the collisions, you know, it's not my area of specialty, but I understand it very well because I've seen it and studied it. In an interaction between these two aircraft, as they were, the weakest element in the system is going to be the thing that gives away the most. When you are, if that drone has collided with a 22 gauge aluminium skin, you know, a couple of Coke cans thick aluminium, it is probably just gonna pass through it without actually it, because of its density and the way it's built, having that much damage, particularly on the battery. But like, to do that to a drone takes a bit of doing. Like, that's more than driving over it with your car or throwing it down the stairs. You know, that's
exactly.
You've snapped it in two and we're into lots of pieces. Like, there's a lot of energy involved there, right? But again, the physics
instant energy, that kind of damage as well, isn't it? The way the props are shattered there, and that battery damage in particular is very telling to me. This isn't a slow crushing motion. This is high impact stuff. So yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. But and in terms of paint transference, etc., I have carried out lots of research today. I know more about the paint, the aviation paint, than I ever thought I wanted to. But of course, there isn't studies in terms of transference onto plastic and that type of thing. But again, obviously, the paint is designed to withstand UV day after day after day and last a very long time and be very tough and to have other things, you know, scrape against it, etc., and the wind and the rain and everything else like that. So this is tough stuff. This isn't, again, even the same as the paint on your car in terms of, you know, two cars scraping together. So I'm not dismissing what you're saying. And the other thing I would say is that obviously we don't know, as I said at the beginning, there may be other bags of evidence with other bits that do have paint on there and wires hanging out and that kind of thing. Who knows? But yeah, it isn't as simple as that, perhaps.
That's it. I think what we can see there, we don't have enough information or data to say there is or isn't paint transference.
Yes,
it's
because it's a picture of something inside a bag. If we got them out, you may find there's actually scuff marks there, etc. That type of thing. So
the whole of the inside of that tray or the underside of the battery might be covered in it. We just don't know. So there's no point speculating about it, guys. Don't speculate about it. Like any accident in the air, we don't know the facts.
Okay, next one. So this collision was over the fire ground or over the lake where the fire plane was filling its tanks, ? Was the TFR over both areas or just the fire grounds? Also, any collision, especially speed of force, is involved. There was a transfer of materials. Again, we've discussed that one. The wing hole was in red painted parts, but the Mini 3 showed no red transfer. So yeah, we've talked about that part of it. In terms of the TFR, yes, there was a TFR across a very wide area. Again, they do say, I'm nowhere endorsing the situation, but there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered. And until all the facts are established, shouldn't jump to conclusions. Excellent point. And as pilots of UAVs, we should understand the risks are real, and we're responsible for reducing the risks before we fly. So it's a good comment. And it's an interesting one because I've seen other comments in terms of with the high winds and that type of thing. Did he take off outside of the TFR and the wind has blown the drone into it and then it's come into contact with it? Well, these are all things that will come out will come out in the investigation. I feel like they're all things that actually start to degrade things a little bit from the point of view of actually the chances and the odds. So I think the odds are probable that the person was flying in the TFRs until we see evidence otherwise, basically. So yes.
Yeah, I was just checking the live maps actually, trying to see them from the time, and the TFRs were massive, huge. Right? Like as they should be. So I think it's, again, we don't know where the collision happened. So how can we, as an audience or hosts on the show, say it did or didn't happen inside a TFR? Forensically, I'm sure they could timestamp the ADS-B data from the aircraft and then the time at which the drone IMU stopped passing calculations to the other parts of the drone, or however they're going to do it. They'll probably be able to work that out. They'll be able to then work out, I would imagine, to within 10 or 20 meters of where the drone was and when, which isn't going to work out well for whoever owns that drone.
No.
I wouldn't suggest. But
no, indeed.
Yeah, we don't know. Again, we don't know. I wouldn't bet the mortgage on it, because we don't know, but it's going to be a 85, 90% chance that it was being flown in a TFR. The way you could work it out is working out where those 415s were operating from, and if they remained within the TFR the entire time. I haven't been back through the ADS-B traces. I don't even know if they're available for those online at the moment, but you could probably see and compare the two very easily and go, yeah, it definitely did happen inside the TFR, or it may not have done. We'll find out.
No, indeed. And actually, Jonathan Webb is asking in the chat right now. We will come back to your chat questions if we have time at the end. Has the drone flight temperature been recovered? Not yet, but obviously with the battery, they'll have a what do you call it, a serial number. And therefore they'll have, law enforcement work with DJI from the point of view that they can get that data and they can download it as well. And bear in mind, there's all the other electronic data around that person on the ground. As soon as they know the general area it's been operated in, you would be surprised what an electronic search warrant can find in a specific geolocation to narrow down who was in that area and what they were doing and what devices they were using and where those devices were. You'd be surprised. So depending on the work they decide to put into this, you would be surprised, as I say. And as I say, this one here actually should only sell drones to people with licenses. Check they've taken some sort of care before purchase. This only works in terms of new drones for a start, and actually the CAA recent consultation did talk about there being more assets added to the apps in terms of when you boot up and making sure that you're competent and know what you're talking about, etc., etc. My problem with that is that a license doesn't make you responsible. What's I've already said that in the show. What's your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's something that we've been around the houses on for a long time, right? When the drone phenomenon started, I at the beginning said, and we actually provided a free training course and basic exam to the CAA at the time, which was just ignored. But that's a story for another day, and we've done that in the past anyway. But I think that now putting that kind of thing in place is closing the stable door after the horse has bolted, right? There are so many aircraft out there. There's so many people with them. There's so many, they are so prolific now that you wouldn't be able to contain that and monitor it anyway. So now it's about us as a community who are interested in this and use these aircraft, getting that message out there and telling people if they're not flying their drones safely, or helping people understand what they should and shouldn't be doing. But again, that requires common sense, and that, it turns out, isn't that common nowadays, right?
No, indeed, exactly. And when we talk about calling people out, I've made a specific video before that was actually titled around "Don't be the drone police." We're not talking about if you see someone's lovely Instagram picture and they're sailing over a hill or something like that, and you think, okay, well, I'm going to ask them 50 questions about whether or not that was legal. The footage we're talking about, the kind of thing we're talking about, and the group moderators and the people who run these groups and that have any kind of moderation on social media need to keep an eye out for these posts in terms of stopping them being posted. But then also, if someone does call it out, trying to, because it's now become a thing where everyone gets bundled on, and there have been comments to that nature on yesterday's video that people are trying to do this, but they themselves are getting trampled on, which is the very nature of social media, of course. And I know that there has to be a part of it in there of the will it be me next type thing, of people that are worried, actually on my flight it's 100% legal, and if they come after this person, will they then come after me and me and me? Not with this extreme example, but I more mean the stuff that's posted online, so we'll have to wait and see on that. So the next question, hang on, if it's the drone parts they recovered, they would be much more smashed up than the image you show, especially if they made a hole in the aircraft wing. Qualified design engineer, and their damaged main body molding makes me think this evidence may have been made up. Now, Matt has already explained this, so we're not going to go back over it necessarily now, but the only thing I would do is, again, just bring up this picture, and I'm actually going to open up this image without trying to crash my entire system and zoom in a bit more. This is just the casing here, as we were explaining, but the casing itself is also highly damaged. There are punch holes there. The front, look at how deformed the front part of that casing is as well. And it's obviously going to be, you can. I'm not saying that that answers conspiracies. But this front part of it here, you can see that that's really gone through an impact as well. So it isn't as if, in my opinion, this is an example of a healthy, this isn't going to fly again. I'm sorry, people. But we're talking about a couple of motors and bits of it. And as I say, there may even be more parts and actually smaller parts, because again, in evidence gathering, you will often find, particularly in airplane crashes, actually, they do start to sort the evidence in by size with these kind of things as well. So that very much could be it. I wish OBS had a button that resized images when you messed with them, but there we go. So yeah, and the other bits of the question, I feel like we'd already answered those. So yes, and this part again, they're talking about the wires being ripped out and should be hanging out again. There may be other bits, but also, and I did answer this question in the video itself. Take apart a DJI drone, go and look at some teardown videos. It's not a bomb inside there. There's not red wire, green wire, and a sea of wires. It's all circuit board and based around those circuit boards with actually as few wires as possible, because they want as few failure points as possible. There's the odd ribbon band and that type of thing as well. So it isn't a sea of them inside these drones, is it?
No, it's not. It's not an efficient way of manufacturing in bulk, and they're all, everything now is integrated circuits, so they can, if something is wrong, they can take a part out and put a new part in, and it all, it's
there's just a shout out there from Will Glover that he couldn't believe it when your Instagram popped up. Hope you're well. Matt went live just before, just to tell everyone that he's coming on tonight. So yes, and you are, of course, you're coming back onto social media in a big way soon, aren't you? This is just the warm up.
Yeah, so it is. Just get him back into
exactly.
it.
That'll get you all excited. For sure. Wrong button. I got too excited then. I was like, Matt's coming back. We're closing. We're done. And again, there you go. Another one saying, surely it'd be in many places if it had hit a plane. There's not as many pieces. I've seen a Mini 3 from a bird strike. Very different type of damage, because of course also the Mini 3 that's been hit by the bird strike then comes to the ground and shatters as well. One thing to remember is that it's hit the wing, opened the wing up and gone inside. That's it. And it's been held there. There's nowhere else. There's no other forms of, impact for it to go through, basically. So I think that's an easy one, fairly easy one to explain personally. This one, I've worked in aviation for more than 40 years, and I can assure you, all you doubters, that a drone of this size can do damage like this. I did include one or two that were on the other side, just for a bit of balance. Birds, which are even lighter, can do significant damage. And those who point out the drone parts are recognizable as mitigation, parts don't vaporize on impact. In bird strikes, on AC bits of the bird survive even fast jet impacts. So much so that the actual species can often be identified, feathers and all. And in actual fact, I don't want to bring this up again for you, Matt, but when we look at this picture, I blurred this picture because of the bloody content that we were on before 7 p.m. So I thought I would, but very much identifiable what that bird was. And obviously that thing's traveled through the cockpit into you and round the cockpit, etc., and obviously taking a door and that type of thing as well. So it's it went through a lot. I mean, to still be a bird.
That's it. So the only part of that bird that wasn't there was its head, and that was lodged into my broken body armor. And you think how quickly that was traveling, relatively, when it came through, and the energy involved. The whole thing's intact. Like it went from 145 knots to 0 in a very, very short space of time, right?
Yeah.
But,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is again, and I've said this before. Which story were we talking about it not being the movies before? It was when we had explosions of some type that was on this channel, wasn't it? It wasn't working on another channel or project. But it isn't the movies in terms of these things. Oh, that's right. When they were saying why didn't they shoot the New Jersey drones down and things, one, there weren't any New Jersey drones, but two, it isn't the movies. You don't just get a nice little puff in the air and that's it. We all go off and celebrate in the bar. That causes debris and everything comes down, etc. So again, this isn't the movies. Things don't necessarily disintegrate in quite the way that you necessarily would imagine. It just doesn't work that way, basically. Simple as that. The next one, that was the same one, sorry. The evidence bag is interesting, but wouldn't there be some red scuffed marks somewhere in the plastics, which we've obviously talked about as well, so we move on from that one. The only thing I think is a bit odd about the picture of the evidence bag is the shatter drone appears to be almost complete. I have no idea how that comes, but there we go. I'm surprised to see what appears to be at least one of the very delicate rotor blades separated, but largely intact. Have these photos been independently verified? Well, they've been independently verified from the point of view that they were released by the FBI as evidence.
Yeah.
And as a journalist, I don't know how much further. I'm not sure we get many calls back if we keep asking the FBI if they faked things. In actual fact, they don't mind saying no, and chain of evidence and all that kind of thing, and all of that would of course come up in court should this ever go to court. But again, there's enough. Two of the motors aren't even here anymore. This motor here in the middle of your screen, towards the top of the screen, both are gone completely. I mean, again, they may be in other evidence bags, and this one here has one that's still there. But again, it's just the positioning of it when it hit the aircraft, etc. It's as simple as that. It isn't some kind of mystical thing. It's perfectly explainable.
I mean, saying that one of the 8 propellers survived by the looks of things, its journey through the aluminium skin, like from what we've seen out in a bag, so it must be faked. It's just like, okay, cool. So where are the other 7? Yeah. Like, what do they look like? And I don't know. I get it, and I understand. The problem is because, as you just mentioned, right, we're shown these things that happen in the movies. We're shown it. How certain things are supposed to happen. We've seen potentially accidents or incidents, and we've got a picture in our minds of what that should look like if a drone hits a plane. But the reality is that, this could have gone, as you said earlier, an inch higher and bounced off and been no damage at all, a scuff, and they've gone, what's that come from? Probably a bird. But it just so happens that it's gone in how it has, and that's the damage that is resultant.
Exactly. Yeah, it is what happens. So the red scuff marks again, and so yes, so that hopefully has answered that one for you. A couple of those were repeated. Apologies. So sorry, I strongly disagree on banning drones on wildfire escape situation. Flying a drone to check on escape route should be part of a basic survival training. One type of death in a wildfire is people escape to a location that they cannot escape and get trapped. So checking the surrounding on the sky, look at danger at a safe space before you plan for an escape is just a technical solution where airspace is congested. Firstly, the type of technology that would require is Skynet, basically, in terms of being able to deal with all of those. And I think actually Wing had plans for this, and you basically would no longer be controlling your drone. Your drone would be flying itself and talking to the rest of the airspace. But actually, I would suggest that the best way to escape a wildfire is to evacuate whilst the evacuation warnings are on. And being able to get out via the normal routes, etc. I think there are other ways not to get caught up from that point of view. It just isn't practical to keep the airspace open for that situation. Basically, it just isn't practical, and that technology does not exist. It would be a bit like the old Reagan Star Shield Star Wars thing, wouldn't it? Basically, it would. It sounds great, but it's just not practical.
And you know what? If you've got the skills to do it and the equipment to do it, and it's going to save your life, then do what you need to, right, to get out safely. But to be honest, for me, my first thought wouldn't be, I'm going to get my drone up in the air because I'm surrounded by fire. I'd have been gone before, or if it's happened, I'd be trying to find a sensible way out. I don't know.
Yeah,
I get
well,
it. But
it's another thing that sounds good, but actually in practice, how much use would it have actually been in terms of a live situation like that? And if fire's close enough that you're being trapped, then you're in all sorts of trouble already. So I hope that didn't happen to the person that made that. And remote ID remote ID is supposed to prevent this kind of thing, complete fail. Now, this is an interesting one because you have nobody on this panel who loves remote ID. Who thinks it was a wonderful thing and, you know, bring it on in the UK and all that kind of thing, etc. You will find varying opinions, but no outright fans as such. Remote ID wasn't supposed to stop illegal drone flights, the same as car insurance, or, you know, ADS-B doesn't stop people breaking the law in their airplanes.
Well, you wouldn't. The aircraft doesn't have a display which would show the remote ID anyway. And when these guys, girls, etc., are flying these aircraft in the perilous, to be quite frank, situations that they are, I mean, I've flown combat missions, I've been shot at and given some back, right? And this is more dangerous and taxing and difficult because it's so dynamic. They're flying so low, in and out of smoke, following the Marshall aircraft, potentially following other aircraft. There is so much going on inside that cockpit. The last thing they're going to be able to do, let alone want to do, is to look at a screen, have someone heads in looking at a screen going, oh, there's a drone over there.
There's a Mini 3.
It doesn't update in real time. We're traveling at 180 knots in the transit, 110 knots at the water drop speed for these aircraft, as I understand it. You are not gonna look or see those aircraft. This is one of the big problems. I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a little rant on this. This is one of the big problems of having, and no disrespect to anybody in the chat, I love you all, but this is one of the big problems of having people committing aviation who don't have manned or crewed aviation experience, because it is impossible to see a Mini 3 when you are flying on a good day and it comes past your aircraft. Like, it's virtually impossible, even if you're looking in the right place. So to see it when there's all this other stuff going on, you're flying at low level, you're in and out of the smoke, as I've said before, it's just not going to happen. And you are not going to be looking down at a screen. There is nothing that can update that in real time anyway, based on the remote ID, because bear in mind, like, a millisecond difference in these two aircraft of where they were, altitude, time, speed, you know, in space, would have meant that they would have missed and we wouldn't be having this conversation. A millisecond.
That's right. Exactly. And in actual fact, when the FAA researched remote ID with manned aviation and actually a UTM, which is different people call it different things, but unified traffic management. So it's bringing lower airspace together with the rest of airspace. The flight deck response, even from just the commercial jet airline pilots associations, was exactly that. They said, we do not want visibility of what's going on in the lower airspace when we're flying our jets up at X thousand feet, etc. We don't need it. There is too much going on already. We don't want to add to that. What will happen perhaps one day with UTM is that the two things will be watched by either AI or traffic control or whatever it may be by that time. And then that body will take decisions to keep those things apart and that type of thing, like Outage Angel's Arrow system. With the drone superhighway that they're developing over Reading Way, it's that's where that's going to happen. But yeah, it's not going to be that. Go on, Karen.
Sorry, and going back to that, and this is the most important part of this entire point, really, that we were talking about just, and that question that came up. The fundamentals are that this drone was more than likely operating in a TFR where it should not have been in the air. And that means that remote ID or not,
no, exactly,
you shouldn't be in the air inside that airspace, because then the crews don't have to look out for the drones. The whole point of that TFR is that the response aircraft that are there only have to worry about bumping into the ground or bumping into each other. There are no other aircraft there at all. Done.
Yeah.
Full stop. Let's concentrate on getting the job done and saving people's lives.
Exactly.
It's that
Completely agree.
simple. So remote ID is irrelevant in this case.
And actually, in terms of mitigating mid-air collision in terms of low-flying aircraft, you don't really need a TFR as a responsible drone pilot. You need to be aware of that kind of issue anyway, and be ready to make changes and make judgment calls. Personally, even if there wasn't a TFR in place, I wouldn't want to fly in that kind of location. Yes, the footage you gain is incredible, and yes, don't tell me not to do something that's a legal activity. I understand all of that kind of thing, but just in terms of my opinion of good airmanship, I don't think you should be doing that. Amok Time Flies makes a point that we made in the show yesterday, that obviously being a sub 250 in the US, it doesn't need to have remote ID. That's right. And in actual fact, if it has the extended battery in there in the US, it then starts to transmit the signal, whether or not there's actually a number attached to it, of course. But there is now counter drone tech operating in the area as well, which is obviously going to help things.
Do you know what though? What is awesome about this and that whole 250 gram thing, etc., and bringing it back from the other side. You mentioned this earlier, but again, there's a really important point to put on the fact that the regulations that we have, as frustrating as they are, the training that we have, as frustrating as that can be, the 249 gram limit, as frustrating as that can be, actually, all of those checks and balances prove to me, like as a regulator, I'll be like, oh, do you know what? And they won't, we know that. But I would be like, do you know what? Everything we've done, the mitigations we've put in place have worked, because this hasn't happened before, we'll say. We know it has a couple of times, right? But not in these circumstances. Hasn't happened before. So the TFR works. It keeps most people on the ground. Those people who are in the air, the big airspace rule has worked, and people having a bit of an understanding, oh, I've heard an aircraft, I'm going to bring it down. Perfect, that's worked. All these different barriers to the accident happening have worked. And when the accident did happen, the fact that this drone only weighed 249 grams proves to all of us, I think, that 249 gram limit perhaps was a sensible one, because the aircraft that has interacted with this did manage to land safely. The crew have made it on the ground safely, and they do get to go and have a nice warm cup of tea and fly to Canada back to their families, when the aeroplane's fixed.
Exactly.
That, if nothing else, proves that all of those barriers have worked, and when the accident has happened, we've absolutely smashed it. We've got away with it this time.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. And actually, without breaching any NDAs or anything else like that about certain product launches that may or may not be coming up in the very, very, very near future, but that's about to become even truer of drone technology, frankly. So keep an eye out on the channel for that one. And the drone dad's saying, if you're in the position where you need to evacuate by using a drone, find open routes. It doesn't really matter if it's legal or safe to fly, which is essentially what Matt was saying.
Yeah.
Survival is your highest priority. Different scenario. Yeah. I think that's a really good way of putting both what Matt said and here the drone dad is saying as well. So
yeah.
So UAP pilot Matt is saying, are the FBI saying drones were being used to set fires? No. Like in Ukraine with flares hanging? No. Will they imply this in the future? Well, who knows? I'm not sure if there's evidence to that. I mean, that's another whole conspiracy route, which is always fun. Gretchen Dupree, when my drone crashes into the lawn, its propellers and nose and stuff all get bent up. That's why they come with extra pairs. Yeah, exactly. It isn't difficult to get damage on these things. Only the Droney, the max wind speed resistance is a good one, actually, of the DJI Mini 3 Pro is 24 miles per hour. It was gusting around 40 mile per hour that day. The 24 mile per hour max wind speed resistance is what DJI place on the drone in terms of what their algorithm can definitely handle, and in terms of care refresh claims and insurance claims and damage and everything else like that. Those are the working parameters. As a former RAF helicopter pilot, I'm sure there are certain envelopes that perhaps if that aircraft was being operated in a civilian capacity, you probably couldn't do half the things you were doing because you're pushing the envelope quite literally beyond those levels. That 24 miles an hour is just the guidance in terms of the manual. There are lots of videos on YouTube with wind tests. I don't like them personally, but you can go and find wind tests of the Mini 3 Pro, and even the Mini 2 actually wasn't that bad in the wind, surviving much higher winds than that. And also, of course, nobody's saying that we have an enough information to say whether or not the drone was in control or not. He may have taken off and lost control instantly. Who knows? We just don't have enough of that information. But the negative doesn't prove the positive, and vice versa, basically, from that point of view. So yeah, but it's a, again, I don't mind people raising these questions, because if you don't ask, you don't know, basically, from that point of view. Yeah, again, guitar stuff saying about it punching a fist-sized holes in supported aluminium. It's really not supported in that particular part, as we were showing, in terms of the structure of the aircraft, etc. That just isn't how it works, basically. So
yeah, so we discussed that in detail earlier on, if you missed it.
Exactly. So we've been going for just over an hour, and I think that will probably calm things down in terms of giving the feedback. I was finding myself answering the same comments over and over again, and this can now be the go watch this video and get the excellent feedback from Matt Williams as well, which has been absolutely superb. How long is it going to be until you're back on social media?
Well, hopefully next week. So I've got a video coming out on Mr. MPW channel next week. Just to say we're coming back and what the plan is. But yeah, we've got a flight simulator build. I've got my flying medical back. I've started to do my my private pilot's license here in Canada, because I've got to redo everything. And then looking forward to getting instructor ticket and things done as well. So yeah, it's quite exciting. And the journey for that, I'll be getting away from the drone side on the Mr. MPW channel. It will be about aviation, and yeah,
nice.
It's exciting. We'll be back.
I've just put the Mr. MPW link in the chat, so please, everyone, go across, make him smile. And there's over 200 people still here. Thank you. Make him smile and see another 100 subs there next time he checks, because that's going to be awesome stuff. If you've been interested in this conversation, you will be very interested in what Mr. MPW is going to become. And I'm probably going to be one of the first members that signs up, and I'll be the groupie in the chat, which is wonderful. I get to relax and watch content for once, which will be really interesting. So yes,
amazing,
excellent. Well, as I say, thank you very much for being here. I really do appreciate it. If everybody were 5 likes off 100 likes before the show ends, which is amazing. Thank you again to Paul for Steel City Drone Pilot for the very, very generous super chat.
Amazing.
So, thank you, sir. Yeah, please. 98, 101. There you go. We got over 100 likes. Thank you very much, everybody. I really do appreciate that. And that's it, really. We'll see you next time. I've just noticed I've moved my buttons around and can't actually see my outro. There it is, my outro button. there are a lot of questions and tiles, and we put this show together fairly quickly, actually.
Live streaming problems.
Yeah, exactly. We will tell you a story one day. Again, it's on my channel previously, of how much preparation goes into my shows versus Matt's shows. And do you know what? The annoying thing is, his shows are so much better. Isn't that annoying?
It's been a long time. It's
annoying, though. It's so annoying. But there we go. That's just natural talent for you. Okay, everyone. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Sean out. Last word to Matt.
Cheers, guys. Fly safe, everybody. Blue skies.
Ooh, blue skies. It's back.